For 9 years, the people of Dusty Fork called him the crazy native. They said he spent his days wandering the hills, talking to rocks, pressing his ear against the ground like he was listening for something no sane person could hear. They said he lived in a cave like an animal, refusing the civilization that had been so generously offered to his kind. They said he was touched in the head, damaged, a reminder of why the native peoples were destined to fade away while progress marched forward. Samuel Crowfeather heard all of it. The whispers when he came to town for supplies, the mothers pulling their children close when he walked past, the men who called him crazy native to his face and laughed when he didn't respond. He never argued. He never explained. He just kept searching, kept listening, kept following signs that only he could read. Because Samuel Crowfeather knew something the people of Dusty Fork didn't. Beneath their feet, beneath the dry and dying land, there was water, more water than they could imagine. And when the drought came, the terrible, killing drought that would turn the valley into a graveyard, he would be the only one who knew where to find it. Samuel had been born in 1847, in the shadow of the Bighorn Mountains, to a people who had lived on this land since the time before memory. His father was a medicine man of the Crow Nation, keeper of the old knowledge, reader of the earth's secrets. His mother was a waterfinder, a woman blessed with the gift of sensing water hidden beneath the ground, a gift that had saved their people through countless droughts. The earth speaks, his mother had told him when he was young, pressing his small hand against the soil. Can you feel it? The water moves beneath us like blood through veins. Learn to listen, and you will never thirst. Samuel had inherited his mother's gift. By the time he was 12, he could find water where others saw only dust. He would walk the land with his eyes half closed, feeling the subtle pull beneath his feet, sensing the vibrations that indicated underground streams and hidden reservoirs. His people called him "He Who Hears Water," and they valued him as they valued rain itself. Then the white men came. The treaties were broken before the ink was dry. The Crow were pushed from their lands, herded onto reservations, told to forget everything they had been and become something new. Samuel's father died fighting. His mother died of the white man's sickness. By the time Samuel was 25, he was alone, the last keeper of knowledge that stretched back generations, with no one left to share it with. He tried the reservation. He tried the peace that felt like slow death. But the boundaries were arbitrary lines drawn by men who had never walked this land, and they cut him off from the places where his gift could be used, where water could be found, where his people's knowledge had meaning. So he left. He walked south in the spring of 1879, following the pull of water beneath his feet, searching for a place where he could live on his own terms. He found it in a valley the white men called Dusty Fork, an arid stretch of land that the settlers had claimed despite its obvious lack of water, banking on wells and prayers and the stubborn belief that determination could conquer nature. Samuel knew better. He could feel what lay beneath this valley, a vast underground lake, fed by snowmelt from distant mountains, waiting in the darkness for someone who knew how to find it. He could sense it the moment he set foot on the land, a thrumming presence that called to the gift his mother had given him. He made his home in a cave in the hills above the valley, and he began to search. The people of Dusty Fork noticed him immediately. A native man living alone in the hills, wandering the landscape without apparent purpose. It was impossible to ignore and easy to mock. The settlers had brought their prejudices with them from the east, and they found in Samuel a convenient target for their fear and contempt. What's he doing up there? they asked each other. Looking for gold, probably. They're all like that. Lazy, but greedy. I heard he talks to the ground, gets down on his knees and whispers to it. Crazy native. That's what he is. Crazy as a loon. The name stuck. Within months, everyone in Dusty Fork knew about the crazy native in the hills. The strange man who wandered and muttered and seemed to be searching for something that didn't exist. Samuel heard the name and let it pass over him like wind. Names were just sounds. What mattered was the water. Finding the underground lake took 3 years. Samuel walked the valley systematically, mapping the subtle signs that indicated water's presence beneath the surface. He noted where certain plants grew, desert willows and cottonwoods that sent their roots deep, seeking moisture no surface well could reach. He watched where animals gathered in the driest months, following instincts as old as life itself. He pressed his hands and ears against the rock, feeling for vibrations, listening for the whisper of moving water. The entrance was hidden in a narrow canyon 3 miles from town, a crack in the rock face barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Samuel found it in the summer of 1882, following a trickle of moisture that seeped from the stone after a rare rain. He lit a torch and entered. The passage descended steeply, twisting through limestone that had been carved by water over millions of years. The air grew cooler as he went deeper, and the smell changed, from the dry dust of the surface to something ancient and mineral and alive. After perhaps 100 yards, the passage opened up. Samuel stopped, stared, forgot to breathe. The cavern was enormous, a cathedral of stone stretching into darkness beyond the reach of his torch. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like frozen rain. The walls glittered with moisture, with mineral deposits, with the evidence of water that had shaped this space since before humans existed. And at the bottom of the cavern, black and still and vast, lay the lake. Samuel approached the water's edge slowly, reverently, the way his mother had taught him to approach all sacred things. He knelt and touched the surface, feeling the cold bite into his fingers, the impossible reality of what he had found. The lake stretched further than he could see. Its waters were clear and pure, fed by some deep source that had nothing to do with the surface drought, nothing to do with the wells that would inevitably fail. This was the Earth's secret, hidden for millennia, waiting for someone with the knowledge to find it. "Thank you," Samuel whispered, to the earth, to his mother's spirit, to the gift that had led him here. "Thank you for showing me." He sat by the water for a long time, planning what to do next. He didn't tell anyone. It wasn't spite, or not entirely spite. It was practicality. Samuel knew how white men responded to valuable discoveries. They would take the lake for themselves, fence it off, charge money for water that the earth had provided freely. They would push him out, claim credit for the find, probably kill him if he protested. He had seen it happen before. He had seen everything taken from his people, every gift twisted into a weapon against them. So he kept the secret. He improved the passage, widening it in places, creating handholds for the steep sections, making it accessible but not obvious. He brought tools down into the cavern and built a small dock at the water's edge, a place where containers could be filled easily. He created a hidden camp inside the cave, a living space where he could stay for days at a time, connected to the water that had become his purpose. And he watched the valley, waiting for what he knew was coming. The drought began in the spring of 1886. It started slowly, a dry March, an April without rain, a May that brought only dust and wind. The wells in Dusty Fork dropped a few inches, then a few feet, then began to fail entirely. The creek that had given the town its name slowed to a trickle, then dried up completely. By July, there was panic. "We need to dig deeper wells," the mayor announced at a town meeting. "The water's down there somewhere. We just need to reach it." They dug. They hit rock at 30 feet, at 50 feet, at 100 feet. The earth beneath Dusty Fork was dry as bone, offering nothing but dust and desperation. By August, livestock was dying. By September, families were leaving. By October, the town that had held 200 people was down to 60, and those who remained were rationing water like gold. Samuel watched it all from his cave, making secret trips to the underground lake, drinking his fill while the valley withered. He felt no pleasure in their suffering. That wasn't who his mother had raised him to be. But he also felt no obligation to help people who had spent years treating him as less than human. Let them struggle, he thought. Let them learn what it means to need something they cannot take. Then he saw the children. There were 5 of them, gathered at the dried creek bed, digging in the sand with their bare hands, hoping to find moisture that wasn't there. The oldest was maybe 10, a girl with sun-bleached hair and a face aged by worry beyond her years. The youngest was barely 4, a boy who kept asking when the water would come back, when he could have a real drink instead of the tablespoon his mother measured out each morning. Samuel watched from the hillside, hidden in the shadows, and felt something crack inside him. These children had never called him crazy native. They had never mocked him or feared him or treated him as less than human. They were innocent of their parents' sins, guilty of nothing except being born in a place that was dying around them. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. Water is life. To deny water to those who thirst is to deny life itself. That is not our way. "They're not my people," Samuel argued with the ghost. "All who thirst are your people. That is what it means to carry the gift." He watched the children dig their useless holes in the sand, watched the little boy start to cry, watched the older girl comfort him with lies about rain that was coming soon. "Damn it," Samuel whispered. He stood up from his hiding place and walked down the hill toward town. The people of Dusty Fork didn't recognize him at first. 9 years of living in the wilderness had changed him. His hair was long and gray-streaked, his face weathered by sun and wind, his clothes a patchwork of leather and cloth that bore no resemblance to anything civilized. He looked like exactly what they had always called him, a wild man, a crazy native, something less than human. But he walked into the center of town like he owned it, stopped in front of the general store where the remaining residents had gathered to discuss their dwindling options, and spoke in a voice that carried across the dusty street. "I know where there's water." Silence. The gathered crowd stared at him, trying to process what they were seeing. "The crazy native," someone muttered. "What's he doing here?" "I know where there's water," Samuel repeated. "Enough for everyone. Enough to survive until the rains come back." Mayor Harrison, a thick-necked man who had been one of the loudest voices mocking Samuel over the years, stepped forward with suspicion carved into every line of his face. "What are you talking about?" "An underground lake, 3 miles from here in the Box Canyon. I found it years ago." "Bullshit." The mayor's voice was flat. "There's no water in that canyon. We've looked. You looked on the surface. The lake is underground, hidden in a cave. And you just happened to find it? You, the crazy man who talks to rocks?" Samuel met his eyes steadily. "My mother taught me how to find water. Her mother taught her. The knowledge goes back further than your people have existed on this continent. I found your lake because I have the gift to find it." You didn't, because you don't. Why should we believe you? You shouldn't. You should come and see for yourself. A murmur ran through the crowd. Hope and suspicion warred in faces that had forgotten what either felt like. Please. The voice came from behind, the girl from the creek bed, the one who had been digging with her siblings. Please, if there's even a chance. My baby brother is so thirsty. We all are. Samuel looked at her cracked lips and sunken eyes, and the desperate courage it had taken to speak up. What's your name? He asked. Emma Whitfield. Come with me, Emma. Bring a bucket. I'll show you the water your mayor doesn't believe in. They went in a group. Emma, her brother Thomas, Mayor Harrison, and a dozen other townspeople who couldn't quite believe but couldn't afford to dismiss the possibility. Samuel led them to the box canyon, to the hidden crack in the rock face that he had discovered 4 years ago. The adults looked at the narrow entrance with skepticism. It barely looked like a cave at all, more like a natural fissure in the stone. In there? Harrison asked. You expect us to believe there's a lake in there? I expect you to follow me and see for yourself. Samuel squeezed through the entrance, lit a torch, and began the descent. Behind him, he heard the others following, cautious at first, then with growing curiosity as the passage opened up and the air grew cool. When they emerged into the main cavern, the reaction was exactly what he had expected. Gasps, silence, tears. The lake stretched before them, black and still and impossibly vast. The torchlight caught the water's surface and shattered into 1,000 reflections. The air was cool and moist, a shocking contrast to the dust bowl above. Emma Whitfield walked to the water's edge as if in a dream. She knelt, cupped her hands, and drank. Great, desperate gulps that ran down her chin and soaked her dress. It's real, she whispered. It's real. It's cold. It's clean. Her brother Thomas pushed past her and plunged his whole head into the lake. He came up laughing and crying at the same time. Mayor Harrison stood frozen, his face cycling through emotions too complex to name. Disbelief, relief, shame, calculation, all of it flickering across his features as he stared at the water that could save his town. How much is there? He finally asked. More than you could use in 100 years, Samuel said. The lake is fed from below, from sources deeper than any well could reach. It will never run dry. And you've known about this for how long? 4 years. 4 years. Harrison's voice hardened. 4 years? And you let us suffer? You watched us ration and struggle and lose our livestock, watched families leave, watched children go thirsty. And you had this the whole time? Samuel faced him without flinching. I watched you call me crazy native for 9 years. I watched you pull your children away when I walked past. I watched you laugh at me, mock me, treat me as less than human because I listened to the earth the way my mother taught me. He gestured at the lake. I found this water using knowledge your people have spent 200 years trying to destroy. The same knowledge you called crazy. The same traditions you beat out of native children in your schools. The same gifts you dismissed as savage superstition. A long silence. The water lapped gently against the stone shore. So yes, Samuel continued, I kept the secret. I let you suffer the way my people have suffered. I let you learn what it means to need something desperately and have no one willing to help. He paused, looking at Emma and Thomas, at the other children who had crowded around the water with desperate joy. But I'm here now. I'm showing you now. Because the children are innocent, and because my mother raised me better than your cruelty deserves. They returned to town with full buckets and news that spread like wildfire. Within hours, the entire remaining population of Dusty Fork knew about the underground lake. Within days, a steady stream of people was making the trek to the cave, filling containers, hauling water back to homes and livestock that had been dying of thirst. The lake gave freely, just as Samuel had promised. Its waters were cold and clean and seemingly endless, flowing from some deep source that had nothing to do with the drought ravaging the surface. Dusty Fork would survive. But the question of what to do about the man who had saved them, that was more complicated. Mayor Harrison called a town meeting 3 weeks after the discovery. "We need to discuss the water situation," he announced. "Specifically, we need to discuss access, rights, and compensation." Samuel attended, standing at the back of the room, watching the faces of people who had mocked him for nearly a decade. "The lake was found on public land," Harrison continued. "That means it belongs to all of us. We should establish a system for fair distribution. The lake was found by me." Samuel's voice cut through the mayor's speech. "On land that was my people's before your government stole it. I spent 3 years searching for it. I spent 4 more years improving the access. The knowledge that let me find it was passed down through generations of my family. Are you saying you own it? I'm saying that without me, you would never have found it. Without my mother's gift and my grandmother's teachings, your whole town would be dead by now." Samuel stepped forward, and the crowd parted to let him through. "I'm not asking for ownership. The water belongs to the earth, not to any person. But I am asking for respect." "Respect?" Harrison's voice was incredulous. "You watched us suffer for months. You watched me suffer for years. You called me crazy. You taught your children to fear me. You treated me as less than human because I was different from you." Samuel looked around the room, meeting eyes that quickly looked away. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for payment. I'm asking you to remember this moment the next time you see someone different and want to mock them. Remember that the crazy native saved your lives. Remember that the knowledge you dismissed as superstition was the only thing standing between you and death." He walked to the door, then turned back. "The lake is there for everyone. I'll continue to maintain the passage and help anyone who needs to learn the route. But I won't be your servant, and I won't be your joke. Treat me as a person, or don't speak to me at all." He left without waiting for a response. The drought lasted another 8 months. During that time, the underground lake became the lifeline of Dusty Fork. Samuel organized water hauling parties, taught the townspeople how to navigate the cave safely, even helped them set up a pulley system to move large quantities more efficiently. He worked alongside people who had mocked him, shared meals with families who had called him crazy, became part of a community that slowly, painfully, learned to see him as something other than a punchline. It wasn't easy. Old habits died hard. There were still whispers, still suspicious glances, still people who couldn't quite accept that they owed their lives to a native man who talked to the earth. But the children led the way, as children often do. Emma Whitfield started visiting Samuel's cave, asking questions about how he had found the water, what other things he could sense in the earth. Her brother Thomas followed, then other children, then a few curious adults who had swallowed their pride enough to admit they wanted to learn. Samuel taught them what he could. Not the full gift. That required the blood, the heritage, the years of training. But the basics. How to read the land for signs of water. How to identify plants that indicated underground moisture. How to listen to the earth with patience and respect. My mother believed that knowledge should be shared, he told Emma one afternoon, sitting at the edge of the underground lake while she practiced the breathing techniques he'd taught her. She said that hoarding wisdom was like hoarding water. It stagnates and becomes poison. The only way to keep knowledge alive is to pass it on. Why didn't you share it before? Before the drought, I mean. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Because sharing requires trust, and trust requires respect. Your people didn't respect me. They feared me, mocked me, treated me as less than human. How could I share anything with people who wouldn't even listen? But you shared it eventually, even though we didn't deserve it. Because you were dying, because the children were suffering. He looked at her. And because my mother's spirit would have haunted me forever if I let people die just to prove a point. Emma laughed. The first real laughter Samuel had heard in months. I like your mother, she said. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you too. She always said the young ones were the hope, the ones who could learn to see differently. The rains returned in the spring of 1888. It started as a drizzle, then grew into a downpour, then became a weeks-long blessing that filled the creek and replenished the wells and brought the valley back to life. The people of Dusty Fork stood in the streets with their faces turned up to the sky, laughing and crying and thanking God for deliverance. But they didn't forget the lake. They didn't forget the man who had found it. 10 years after the great drought, Samuel Crow Feather sat at the entrance of his cave and watched the sun set over a valley that had learned, slowly and imperfectly, to change. The underground lake was still there, still visited, still maintained. It had become a landmark, a place where people came not just for water, but for wonder, for the reminder that the earth held secrets worth discovering. A small building had been constructed at the canyon entrance, a shelter for visitors, funded by donations from grateful townspeople. Samuel's name was on a plaque above the door. Discovered by Samuel Crow Feather, 1882. Not crazy native. His real name. A figure climbed the path to his cave. Emma Whitfield, now a young woman of 20, studying to become a teacher. Mr. Crow Feather? She still used the formal address, though he'd told her 100 times to call him Samuel. The town council sent me. They want to know if you'll speak at the anniversary celebration next week. What anniversary? 10 years since you showed us the lake. They want to honor you. Samuel laughed, a sound that still felt unfamiliar after decades of solitude. Honor the crazy native? Honor the man who saved us. Emma sat down beside him. The children I teach, they don't know that name. They know you as the waterfinder, the man who talks to the earth, the keeper of the old knowledge. That's the story we tell now. Stories change. People change too. Slowly, but they change. She looked at him. You changed us, Samuel, not just by finding the water, but by staying, by teaching, by letting us see that different doesn't mean less. Samuel considered this. He thought about his mother, who had always believed that people could grow. He thought about the children he had taught, who would teach their own children, who would carry fragments of his people's knowledge into a future he would never see. I'll speak at your celebration, he said, but only if the children come, the young ones. They're the ones who matter. They'll be there. They always want to hear your stories. Emma stood to leave, then paused. Samuel, thank you for everything. Thank the earth. I just listened to what it was trying to say. She smiled and headed back down the path. Samuel watched her go, then turned to look at the valley, at the green fields and flowing creek, and the town that had survived. because he had chosen to share rather than hoard, to teach rather than withhold. His mother would have been proud. Samuel Crow Feather died in the winter of 1901, peacefully, in the cave that had been his home for over 20 years. They buried him beside the underground lake, in a chamber he had prepared himself, where the earth's steady heartbeat could accompany him into whatever came next. The entire town attended, hundreds of people now, the valley having grown since the drought years, and they stood in the torchlight and honored a man who had been their savior and their teacher. Emma Whitfield, now Emma Morgan, spoke at the service. "When I was a little girl," she said, "my parents called this man the crazy native. They taught me to fear him, to avoid him, to see him as something less than human. And then the drought came, and we were dying, and he saved us anyway." She looked around at the faces in the torchlight, some old enough to remember, most too young. Samuel Crow Feather had every reason to hate us. We had taken his people's land, mocked his traditions, dismissed his knowledge as superstition. We had called him crazy for doing exactly what his mother and grandmother had taught him to do, listening to the earth, honoring its secrets, finding water where others saw only dust. Her voice echoed off the cavern walls. But he didn't hate us. He taught us instead. He shared the knowledge that had saved our lives and asked nothing in return except respect. He showed us that the people we mock, the traditions we dismiss, the knowledge we think we've outgrown, these things have value beyond anything we can measure. She picked up a handful of earth from beside Samuel's grave. This man heard water singing beneath the ground. He heard it because his mother taught him to listen, because generations of his people had refined that gift, because knowledge and tradition and patience had combined into something that looked like magic, but was really just wisdom we had forgotten. She let the earth fall. Let us never forget again. Let us listen for the water. Let us honor those who show us the way. The underground lake still flows today. Visitors come from miles around to see it, the vast dark water in its cathedral of stone, the grave of the man who found it, the story of the crazy native who saved a town that had mocked him. Children still learn about Samuel Crow Feather in school. They learn about waterfinding, about the old knowledge, about the importance of listening to voices different from their own. They learn that the people their great-grandparents dismissed as crazy or primitive or less than human often knew things that civilized people had forgotten. And sometimes, late at night, when the cave is empty and the torches have burned low, people say you can still hear something in the depths, a voice perhaps, or just the echo of moving water, saying thank you, saying remember, saying listen, the way Samuel Crow Feather's mother taught him all those years ago, the way the earth has always spoken, to anyone patient enough to hear.